I will actually start today with a small story about life, death, and process, and then we get going with the discussion. It was actually something that happened to me yesterday. I flew in from JFK to Austin. Scheduled departure time was 6:15. The plane took off like planned, and then 10 seconds into the flight, it made boom, and a loud noise happened, and the airplane started to shake. What had happened? A bird flew into the engine, and unfortunately, damaged the engine. Yes. So that was an interesting moment. Everything went smoothly. So the crew did a great job of consolidating everybody and so on. We actually landed on the airstrip, not on the water. So the moment I felt, okay, so life is secured. Now it's time to think about process again. I was super intrigued by how they would handle the situation, because a bird flying into an airplane or an airplane failing right after takeoff is not a thing that happens all that often, right? So I was really intrigued from a process perspective, how what would be the next steps. So we touch down. You get the typical welcome committee, the 3 fire trucks, and all of the other rescue crews waiting for you and cheering. Hello, welcome back to JFK. We came back to the gate. The gate was all prepared. Everybody was ready. We arrived. They said, please proceed to gate 36. This is where your new airplane is waiting for you. On the way, we have a restaurant where you could grab a sandwich and grab some drinks. Unfortunately, the guys in business class, we have to reseat you. Everybody else in economy, you can keep your seat assignments. So we went to this other gate, and literally less than 2 hours after the planned departure time, the new plane started. So I thought to myself, wow, this is, well done, Delta. A pretty good customer experience, and made me think about the conference and what we talk about, operational excellence, and thought, wow, what an excellent job of first of all caring about safety, but also customer experience, and having such an smooth operations that it really surprised me as a process professional, that I say, wow, this is really something that we can take as a role model, probably. Wow. So with that, I will start the panel on process intelligence and making processes better with my dear colleagues, Abubakar from Discover and Nat Ganesh from Verizon. So maybe over to you first, Abubakar. Talking about airplanes and airlines, you've been in that industry as well, having a short stint at United, but also having seen a lot of other different stations in your life. So what's your perspective of OPEX, and why do we actually do that? What are we doing it for, judging from the different organizations that you've seen?
I gotta say, you're much stronger than I am. I wouldn't be here if I had that experience, but... And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I left United, quite frankly. Nobody from United here? So I was spending my time a lot in the air because I was really supporting international. I think why we do OPEX, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, call it what you want, is just that we have to improve, right? I mean, if you don't do it, you'll fall by the wayside, right? So I think that's one thing we got to, at least this group of people, professionals like us, we really are lucky is that organizations, quite frankly, most of the time, they don't care what you call it nowadays. You hear that more and more, right? They're becoming more methodology agnostic, but more about just continuously improving. And there are so many different trends. It's just, you don't do it, you're out.
So you told me you started in automotive back in the day. So what was the main driving force? Was it customer experience? What was it that drove the initiatives that you were part of?
So I came from a country where I grew up in West Africa, and I came up from a country where continuous improvement, using resources, optimizing resources was not really the mindset, right? So when I came in this country, I wanted to do something different, quite frankly. So I found industrial engineering. Believe it or not, industrial engineering is one of those few engineering disciplines which is taught majority of the time in the U.S. I think Germany and Japan catching, but really that's one American specialty. So that's what I went to school for. Bachelor, master's, now I'm doing my PhD in it. So after that, I went into automotive industry. I remember first time I finished my grad school, General Motors called me and they asked me, what are the 7 types of waste? So I memorized it and they told me, do you want to come in for an interview? And that's how I fell into it. So I started off with, at that time, they were getting spun off. I mean, Delphi, the automotive parts were getting spun off by General Motors. And I came in and they were going through lean transformation. So I would say I've been lucky because it has been a great 20-year experience for me. I've learned a lot.
Maybe over to you, Ned. Introduce yourself a little bit, what your role is, and also what's your focus when we talk about improvement? What are you trying to improve for?
Well, so with Verizon, we embarked upon a journey of process excellence and operational. Now we call it process excellence. Now it was operational excellence before, but essentially it's a side of an evolutionary path. When about 5 years ago, our chairman Lowell McAdam, when he 5 to 6 years ago, he took over the organization and saw that there was a tremendous. There were 2 huge organizations. We had the old AT&T legacy on the wireline side, and of course the growing entrepreneurial wireless side, which had taken over the 2000, because that was what was growing revenues really fast. So, but the challenge that if I kind of think of this as him being like Ben-Hur in the movie, Charlton Heston in the movie Ben-Hur, when he was trying to ride all those 7 horses on a chariot and trying to get it into that chariot race and make them win. So it was, if you think about it that way, it was kind of like heralding a bunch of cats of different organizations with different cultures and trying to blend them together, right? That was a challenge. So that's when he realized, hey, we need to have a common language and bring that into the organization. So when Lowell launched, at that time we just called it operational excellence, and a long name, process transformation. It was initially with the idea of bringing Lean Six Sigma into the organization and trying to use that as a common language in order to bring everybody under the same umbrella to say, okay, let's do it the same way, whatever we do, because we don't want the not invented here, not done here syndrome. So when he put the organization together, I came on board as a part of the leadership team, which is essentially what you would call in some organizations center of excellence. Well, we don't call ourselves that. I'm part of them, the director of the organization that essentially deals with, let's say, 7 or 8 business units. That on the one hand, we serve wireline customers with our Fios equipment and field equipment, et cetera, for TV, right? For when you watch Masters or your Final Four, you want that to work. You don't care how big whether it is Comcast or Verizon or what, you just want the TV to be on and you want to see the stuff, right? Likewise, on the other side, wireless, you just want the signal. Many of you were asking me about, what was that, the big slogan that Verizon used to have, can you hear me now? The guy who now works for Sprint. Yeah. So it was one of the most successful campaigns. So it's like bringing those 2 together. So I support all our business organizations in terms of trying to get, as we're saying, how to view this from a customer experience standpoint. So just to make an example of what you are pointing out, yeah, it was great that Delta responded to the calamity or whatever the minor incident within a matter of 2 hours. What if they had some kind of a preventative or of a process intelligence mechanism by which the plane could have sent a signal to divert the bird, within a fraction of a second and completely avoided that incident? Think about the amount of cost that Delta would have incurred as a result of the incident and everything that goes with it in terms of rectifying it, but what we could have done it preventatively. So we are thinking with process intelligence along those lines, and that's what I'm trying to, I've been successful in trying to get our, our field service organizations to be able to respond in a much more proactive manner to preventing incidents with customers even before they happen. So that's one of our primary goals of leveraging process intelligence for customer experience improvement.
Great. Before we dive deeper in there, maybe one step back. What problem are we actually trying to solve? And you mentioned that in automotive, it was a lot about efficiency, a lot about productivity. So now you're at Discover in financial services. What has changed? Building the OPEX function there. What is different now than compared to the other positions?
I think it's a great question, and that's something I think all of us need to really think about. When we think about the genesis of this movement, I would call it, this great movement, continuous improvement, and you look at Toyota, Taishi Ono, when he started the Toyota production system with Shigeru Shingo, right? They had a problem to solve, which was a productivity problem, right? They wanted to catch up. Ford was 9 times more productive, right? And they were focused on 2 things, just-in-time and automation, right? Quality and materials. So they weren't really into this demake thing, right? This whole complex design thinking. They weren't thinking like that, right? They started off with very simple because they had a problem to solve. And from there grew up what we know today to be a Toyota production system, which is very complex and very heavy, right, in terms of tools. I think we as practitioners need to think like that. So at Discover, when I joined Discover about 10 years ago, I came in with that mindset, thinking organizationally, what are we solving? Even though I was part of a team, the centralized team that did all the DMAIC, master black belt, all that, I still kept thinking, what are we trying to solve as an organization, right? Of course, financial services is not one answer to that, right? It came up with several answers. But there was one which was, high priority. So I found out that one problem that we were really, really trying to solve for was compliance. How do we make compliance part of the processes? If you think about it in the automotive industry, back then when Shigeru Shingo and all these guys were solving problems, how many of you guys been to an automotive plant before, right? I mean, a few years ago, if you guys recall, right, if you go into an automotive plant, where would you see? You would see inspectors everywhere, incoming inspection, process inspection, outgoing inspection. Nowadays, they don't exist anymore. What happened? Quality was built into the station, right? When I compare that to the financial services, that's what I see going on. I mean, today, I see where the automotive industries were a few years ago in the 70s, 80s. You have compliance everywhere. You have first line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense. You've got inspectors. That's what I call them, inspectors. That's everywhere. I think we've got to change that mindset. And to me, that's the problem that we're trying to solve for, is how do we make sure we have quality built in? When we have a rule, when we have a law coming from the outside, from CFPB, from regulatory bodies, how do we make sure that law makes it into the station? How do we make sure that we, as process engineers, come up with a process to build it in so that you don't have all this first line of defense? So to me, I think that's one big problem that we're solving for. And when I took over BPE, Business Process Management, 2014, at Discover, we had 11 people licensed as BPM, with BPM licenses, right? Since I started that movement, that number now is 260. 260 users. We started off with 1 business unit when I took over to 28 now business units using it now, using this whole process, but being driven mainly by compliance, right? And we haven't had any major findings. If you think about the financial service in the last 10 years, I tend to use this number. $320 billion is what globally, financial services have paid in fines. I mean, talk about a problem to solve.
Zooming into that a little bit. I mean, before, when you come in with process improvements, it's about, better outcomes, efficiency, and so on and so on. Now you go to people and say, we improve the process for the reason of compliance. What is easier? What is easier to sell? Is it easier to sell efficiency and productivity, or is it easier to sell compliance?
In our world, I think it's easier to solve compliance, right? Because when you think about, you got to be really analytic about it, right? When you think about what we do, in our business at least, we facilitate transactions, right? And usually, it's really branding, We discover financial services. I mean, people choose us, carry our credit cards, not because of the few cents, but because it carries a certain, it means something to them, right? People choose Visa, MasterCard for different reasons. But where you can quickly lose your brand is through compliance, right? If you're not compliant, you get, fined. All of a sudden, your whole branding is compromised. So I think for us, it's really in the compliance.
Okay, great. You mentioned something very, very interesting. Becoming proactive, predicting things, all of that. So, I mean, this definitely leverages the power of data, right? So let's dive into that a little bit. And we had this question earlier today as well. How many insights can you actually derive from data analytics? And what are the insights that you drive rather through discussion, through collaboration, by putting 10 smart people into one room and finding a solution? So what's your take on that? Is it an either or?
That's a question you are posing to me, and the answer to that is, and it goes back to what I think someone mentioned earlier today. I think it was Ken Goldman. In God we trust, all else bring data. Well, I think, as Adam Nash said, that was incomplete. That should have been a caveat to that. How good is the data? Okay, how good is your data integrity? Sure, you trust data, but then that assumes that your data integrity is really, you have already vetted that, and you have done that. Otherwise, it could lead you down completely wrong path. So what I would say is, look, we still need to have data, but data without verification of validation of it is going to lead you down the wrong path. So what I personally found in this experiment, or this experience, that we had tried to get our what we call field service organization, especially when we support 5 million customers for TV service, right, on FiOS. The challenge is, look, if you are watching one of these main sports events or one of the major events that you have got the service for, what if suddenly in the middle of the event that your TV goes off? You're not going to be very happy that, oh, you have the world's biggest company serving you, right? At that time, if the service is gone, nor are you going to be happy that we did overtime or brought people in 2 hours after the event is over in order to get you back on, because you have missed that particular window of what you are really looking to have the service for. So that's where I would say that our focus is now, how can we mine our data? How can we use what we got here? How do we harness the power of process intelligence or data intelligence to be able to say, hey, what portion of these customers, what segment of these customers are most likely, like in an actuarial manner, like for instance, insurance companies do this all the time, right? They have a pretty sophisticated algorithms to predict, at least statistically, with statistical significance, what percentage of their population are going to be in what risk categories. Could we do the same thing? Could we bring that same mentality of proactive or preventative maintenance as opposed to reactive maintenance, right? That was the key driver to what we wanted to do, and to convince the operational organization that, hey, this impacts customer experience, right? Because in the sense that once you have created a negative experience for the customer, it doesn't matter how well you go back to fix it, they may still have that lingering sensation. You want to get that out of the way. So we are trying to drive that. So data, I would say, is definitely the key, because that's what tells us where to go look for these opportunities. But at the same time, what I would caution is the ability to be able to validate that data ahead of time before we get into decision making. So that's a challenge.
You just mentioned mentality and changing the mentality, in approach to that. Let's talk a little bit about skill set and capabilities and how our role as operational excellence professionals change in this world. Do we now need data scientists and machine learning experts as a mandatory piece of an OPEX team?
My short answer to that is yes. I think they definitely help. I mean, machine learning is starting to become really an important part and an integral part of what we do. For instance, we use some kind of artificial neural networks in order to understand the box that we assign to each customer in order to provide service to them. And we don't look upon it now as a box. It represents a one-to-one relationship with the customer. If something happens to that, and the customer, as I said, if the customer loses service, that is a part of the problem. So how can we learn ahead of, how long has this box been there? We call it fancy names, etc., optical terminal, but essentially it is from a customer standpoint, it is a service box. And the question is, can we know the genealogy? Can we know the intelligence about that box through machine learning? And these are techniques that help us. These are obviously techniques that have come about. Just like IBM Watson, these are going to make us much better faster in diagnosing the problem even ahead of time. But I think, it is definitely an important part of the tool set that we bring into play, just like, as Abubakar was saying, VLSS or design thinking or agile, these are all methodologies that we need to leverage in a manner that is most optimal to the problem that we are trying to address.
But one thing I'd like to add on that, I do agree 100%. I think we definitely need to be data scientists, but we have to be careful not to get caught up in that, in that data science, right, process, which can take a long time because the business needs results. They need results right there and then. So I think as we are, driving this whole movement, we have to keep thinking about what is the quickest way to get results, right? I mean, how many of us get involved into DMake and the businesses are getting less and less really interested in the whole DMake? Why? Because it takes time, right? So I think this is where BPM can be leveraged. Can we build in a DMake process, right? Just think about it, right? Can we build in a DMake process within the whole business process improvement? Next week, I'm going to be in Maryland at Informs, right? And where I'm interested at their conference in Maryland, in Baltimore. And why I'm going there is really to see in these operational research tools, right? Because here we're talking about BPM advances. Are there something in the operational research area where now we're really gaining speed in how we doing DMake, how we defining the problem, how we getting and cleansing the data, how we analyzing the data. After all, that's what operational research is about, right? Analytics, right? Quick analytics. Can we build in DMake in such a way that we can quickly get the results? I think we need to be really fast.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I mean, I was also very happy to see that in preparation for this conference, there was one particular discipline or type of technology that was asked for, that is process mining, that seemed, that creates a lot of attention these days, but only few people have really adopted it at scale. Is that something that you're actively looking into or deploying already, or that is on the roadmap for you guys?
At this stage, I mean, that is something that I would say we are doing it in not, as you say, not in scale, definitely not at scale, but in sort of individual bits and pieces. Mainly, we have tried to introduce it through the Lean Six Sigma program and in projects, et cetera, specific projects where we have the ability to do better process mining and leverage that in order to improve it. But as you point out, okay, as these techniques come along, I think our job, and I see our responsibility, is to keep our eyes and ears open and bring whatever is the fastest and the most reliable technology there to be able to leverage it for business reasons. So I support that, right?
Yeah. And it's a great occasion to be here at this event because there is actually somebody who can present some stuff in that area.
Oh,
so this 2 seconds of advertisement, come to our booth. Okay, open the floor for questions. Who has a questions for our panelists?
Oh?
So, Nat, I was curious about how you're talking a lot about trying to shift to the proactive side, and that's always one of the challenges is everybody conceptually gets that, but when it comes time to put money and effort into making that sale, it's hard to say this is the value of what I prevented from happening versus responding to it later. How's your approach been, or what have you seen as successful strategies for selling that?
Right. Very good question. So I don't know how many of you are from the East Coast here, but
Show of hands for East Coasters.
East Coasters. Well, if you have been, you know how this winter has been, right? I mean, how many Nor'easters? 4? One after the other, right? So we got hit. And definitely one of the things that happens is, our call for dispatch, which is, field dispatch, goes up tremendously when these things happen, right? Because regardless of how good our equipment is, there is this failure. So this program that we had put into place, and it took almost a year and a half to truly get that implemented, to develop and put that into service, and it is still going on. It's just we have only touched about 5 to 10% of our overall customers at this point, right? When we did analysis of the post-storm dispatch rates after we got the program in place in the counties that we actually implemented, or in the locations that we actually had it implemented, we found that our dispatch rates went down because we had already changed out a lot of the equipment, even though they may not have completely failed at that time. We found that our dispatch rate results were much lower compared to what it was before. So in fact, if somebody is from Montgomery County in Maryland, we got a call back from the director saying, hey, I've been waiting for dispatch calls, and it has not happened. So thank you guys for doing something, in terms of being proactive and addressing this problem. The short answer on the financial side is yes, that is a challenge. So in the sense that we would like to replace all of the, go ahead and change out all of that, but we can't do that. That's why the 5 to 10%. So that's where you bring in your statistical experts, modeling, et cetera, in order to be able to say, where is the most likely bang for the buck, right? I mean, this is the most likely population that we can replace, because that's where we have seen past incidences of exceeding failure. So that's how we have been trying to be very selective and surgical in terms of how we go about implementing this program. Thanks.
Much. Round of applause for our panel.